Hey, folks, on to the next one. Outer space, my life in orbit. What's life in space like? Comfortable. Of course, not everything's a bed of roses. Gravity under 1G isn't great for your bones or muscles. Synthesized food isn't to die for, and stuff from Earth is as rare as it is expensive. If you live in a private orbital station, congrats, you're richer than me, you will always see the same faces. But if you live in a hybrid station like Crystal Palace, you'll have to live with corporal rat bachelor parties every weekend. But don't let that put you off. There are more upsides than downsides to living in orbit. First of all, safety. To get into orbit, you need a lot of zeros in your bank account, which means you won't see legions of homeless people, skezzed out gangsters, or aggressive joy toys. The exception to that being the lunar colonies, but no self-respecting orbital dweller would ever set foot there. In other words, you can walk outside at night unarmed without security and come back home in one piece, up wild, undisturbed. Amazing, right? In theory, anyway. I'd imagine anyone up there would also be rich enough to be untouchable. Then again, at the same time, imagine the orbital stations probably won't care too well for crime, even if you are rich. They don't want. It'll be a weird line to tread. They would care deeply for security. But at the same time, if you're rich enough, you may still be untouchable. It's just they're giving such a sales pitch for security and safety that I can't help but be skeptical about how safe it is. Like, that's the thing you'll see with some of these notes. Oh, this thing's great. This thing's great. Sponsored by this thing. Or, whatever. It feels like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So, just them hyping the safety now has me paranoid. Well, not paranoid, but doubting how safe it is. Secondly, quality of service. Anyone in the customer service sector had to rack up an enormous debt to come here. They don't hope to pay it off within their lifetimes, just raking a lot of tips, which means they'll bend over backwards to satisfy every whim. If you're an employer, you don't have to worry that an employee you just hired and trained at your expense will suddenly quit and go work for the competition for a few extra eddies a week. Many stations, especially private ones, simply don't have competition, and if they do, it's basically negligible. Agreements can be made so situations like that don't occur. Thirdly, and most importantly, no government can tell you what to do, where, and how. Orbital stations are autonomous and governed by their own laws, and there aren't that many of them. If you can afford your own station, you're undisputed lord and master of your own corner of space. You want to tie the help up to a whipping post when they make a mistake? Go right ahead. Want 5 wives or 4 husbands? I'm sure you'll have a line of willing volunteers. Again, there was the talk of the other 2 stations, and then reference further that any scientific developments will probably come from them. But I question how truly independent those stations can be, because they can't truly be fully self-sufficient. There's a limit to their production capability. There's a limit to their... they need resources. Resources that can only be gotten through, say, mining, and then refining heavy amounts of it. So even if that station has mining ships, then they'll need massive amounts of factories, smelting, production lines, a ton upon ton. Then they'll need tons of food production. So these places couldn't be truly self-sufficient, meaning that if a government wanted to, they could probably get in the way of, big enough corporation, big enough company, big enough corp or big enough government could get in the way of the functioning of that station. Denying transports. There's various ways of doing it, I'm sure. I suppose they'll end up stepping on others' toes, but if the station gets involved for protection from another corp, then they're no longer independent. That corp now owns them. If they stay truly independent, then it's that station being directly threatened by that company or government. I question, how truly independent they can be. Now, I suppose they would have to go really far to get the corporate government's ire, but given that those 2 stations that I mentioned previously in one of these readings broke free and like rose up in revolt, they would have that ire there already. So, like say if they pissed off Arasaka, imagine just being in orbit wouldn't keep them anyway safe. Smaller corps probably, but if they pissed off Militech or Arasaka, they would be independent for long, one way or the other. But maybe there's something I'm missing. But I haven't a clue. If you have any input, comment in the comments. Maybe there's something talked about elsewhere within notes that I haven't gotten to read yet, or within the source books or something. Maybe there has been word of God on it. It's basically I'm just wondering how unreliable narrator is a concept within media, where the narrator says something but it's not entirely accurate or could be flatly wrong. Either the narrator's lying or they're blind. It's a blind spot or what have you. This could be that, or maybe he's entirely accurate. Having a clue.